Hi guys, welcome back to the channel and to this very important mainstay topic for auditors on public places, spaces and restricted sites. This outline is by no means exhaustive, and remember, the responsibility on due diligence is on you to ensure that you are lawfully on site, such as to exercise your entitlement. Useful tools are given in the links beneath the video. This topic is explored in two parts and should be viewed in conjunction with the topic on trespass and aggravated trespass. Part 1, designated and restricted sites under the Serious Organised Crime Act 2005, and the second and relevant part on streets, public highways, byways and rights of ways. Remember basic rules: no audit is the same, there can be grey areas, and always do the due diligence and do your homework. This presentation merely reflects the enormous scope of audits and a huge number of scenarios which can present vast challenges from a variety of laws, ranging from national security regulations on military bases, police stations and nuclear sites, even royal residences. For conventional auditing, challenges include the boundaries of private roads and public highways. There are also special protections conferred to port authorities. Ground rules can constantly change with PSPO's, Public Space Protection Orders. So if you're a drone flyer, then it brings into scope regulatory compliance on airspace and the air navigation laws. Keep up to date. Remember, ignorance is no excuse in the law, and remember some basic rules apply. Because someone else is doing it doesn't mean to say it can be done. So always do your due diligence and be lawfully present on a site. Sites which are designated or restricted by the Secretary of State fall under the protection of a piece of legislation known as the Serious Organised Crime and Police Act 2005, which should be overtly displayed on notices around the boundary of the site. It is a criminal offence to trespass on a designated site under section 128 of the same Act. So, let's have a look at a loose definition of a designated site. Crown land, which includes the MOD, RAF and Navy bases. Land belonging to the King in his private capacity or as an immediate heir to the throne in his private capacity. A site which appears to the Secretary of State to be appropriate to designate in the interest of national security, and that can include prisons, and of course all licensed nuclear sites. So let's break them down and have a little look at them individually. As can be seen from some of these designated sites, they have their own police forces. For example, the Civil Nuclear Police for licensed nuclear sites, the MOD Police for military bases, barracks and airfields, and the Port and Docks Police with special jurisdiction and powers, to which we have made a separate presentation on the Port of Liverpool Police. And believe it or not, even specialist cathedral police with limited jurisdiction. This means because of the importance of the sites and high level of security, many facilities may be patrolled by armed police, as in the case of the City of London for government and parliamentary buildings. So back to the serious business of trespassing and the consequences. So let's have a look at the consequences of trespassing on a designated site. It is a criminal offence to trespass on a protected site designated under the Act. Note the key word to be criminal and not civil. A protected site means either a licensed nuclear site or a designated site by the Secretary of State, as we have discussed. Let's now look at the penalties under the Act. Expressly section 128, which should feature overtly on the notice, and a person who is found guilty of trespass may attract a term of imprisonment for 6 months or, alternatively, a level 5 fine on the scale. So the consequences of trespass are serious. So guys, the moral of the tale is to establish site boundaries. The .gov website says they are defined by their address and a map of the boundary can be found on the legislation website. I've had a look and these are not readily available, although they may be buried deeper in the legislation document. So let's just round off by looking at some simple ground rules. Responsible auditing. Respect boundaries, avoid trespass, be professional and strike a balance. If you are auditing a prohibited, restricted or designated site, it is highly likely that you will be unable to fly the drone due to no-fly zones. Respect the law and CAA compliance and use an app such as Drone Assist or the CAA to confirm the status and fact. Due to the high level of security on these sites, always allay concerns on suspicion. Remember, you are a photographer, not a terrorist. Also, be aware of the powers under the Prevention of Terrorism Act, or as amended, to stop and search. Always emphasise your legitimate purpose by indicating what your intention is, whether it be architecture, history, culture or stock photography. So, having understood the background, let's have a quick gallop through the many and varied designated sites across the United Kingdom by category and illustrate a few of them with a few loose images. The categories being royal sites, government sites, MOD, nuclear and defence. Let's whiz through in order in a standard format, showing the site categories and an insight into the airspace restrictions reflecting the site importance. We will pause to comment on one or two interesting sites. This one consists of GCHQ at Cheltenham, otherwise known as the Donut, due to its distinctive shape. It's more likely that they'll be watching you. Turning to government and parliamentary buildings in central London, where there will be a rigid no-fly zone restriction and a high level of enhanced security with armed police. See some of Auditing Britain's links in the description below on auditing the MI5 and MI6 buildings. Turning to RAF Menwith Hill at Harrogate, which is a US-UK communication site, where these golf ball structures draw the eye or camera from the road. Here is a good example of creating privacy on a grand scale. The golf ball or radome provide not only weather protection but also conceal configurations of electronic arrays and antennae on the site, which could have adverse consequence for hostile reconnaissance. Turning to nuclear sites, where there is a dedicated civil nuclear police constabulary which maintains a high security armed presence. Again, these sites will have a significant zone restriction from both the land and the sea, necessary to protect our national infrastructure and freedoms. So, on our lightning tour of UK sites, we conclude with Portendown, a government defence research establishment, and the Devonport Royal Dockyard at Plymouth, part of Crown Land Defence Estate. As might be expected, both these sites have severe air restrictions and no-fly zones. Thanks for hanging in on part 1, and if you found it useful, join us in part 2 after a tea break. For roads, streets and rights of way, which is a widely contested issue on most audits on the street. See you shortly. Okay guys, welcome to part 2 of the presentation, probably the most contended issue amongst auditors: footpaths, streets, roads and highways. In many auditing scenarios we come across the limits of authority as to where a public road, maintained at public expense, begins. It is very important that an auditor does their homework before asserting a right without some degree of evidence or understanding. This is important to avoid trespass and to ensure that a drone flight is flown legally from public land. Please remember though that every auditing scenario is different and there may be more than one set of rules in play. We deal with trespass in another 10-minute Mainstay video elsewhere. Turning now to rights of way. From an audit scenario or drone launch, we need to be on public, not private land. So there needs to be a statutory use by right or a statutory use off right. There is a difference, but for the purpose of this overview, the important criteria is that there is a statutory or lawful right for the public to be there, so that if you launch your drone, you're not launching it on private land. If you're auditing a site, you can usually confirm the rights of way network online, i.e. the footpaths crossing green spaces, by looking at the definitive rights of way map, which will show you the location and route where you have a right to pass and repass, such as a public footpath. Legislation usually requires them to be marked when they cross a main highway, such as an A road, where you will see the recognisable way mark. Turning to the boundaries of streets and roads, we are going to illustrate a useful little street tool for confirming if a road is maintained at public expense, as per the links in the video below. The website is called FindMy Street and is found on the website as follows. We are also going to illustrate its use in an audit scenario. We are going to look at a scenario in a link given in the video by DJE Audits on a visit to DB Broadcast, Lancaster Way, Ely, CB6 3NX. So let's have a look at FindMy Street. What's your view? Was the audit on a private road or was it on a public road? You decide and leave your view in comments. Was the owner correct? Was he reasonable? Would you have flown the drone? Was it a permissive road where the permission can be withdrawn? And did the flight take place after instruction? Happy ending for all, but was the security guard actually right? You decide. A big shout out to DJE and the participants who remained unassuming and professional throughout and resolved the issue by discussion. Remember, don't just rely on Google Maps. Finally, we touch upon PSPOs or Public Space Protection Orders in two separate audits which we will look at subsequently as scenario analysis. We illustrate potential misuse of this Act in the case of Auditing Britain, where AB, without justification, was made the subject of a dispersal order. In the case of DJ Audits, wishing to cover journalistically a protest using the drone footage but not being part of the assemblage being dispersed. Two interesting scenarios which we will look at in the separate topic. So, what is a PSPO? A PSPO, or Public Space Protection Order, is an order which bans specific acts in a designated geographical area in the UK as set out in the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act of 2014. In order for it to be effective, a number of criteria have to be in place. The specific cases of antisocial behaviour are varied, but none of which include the taking or making of a photograph in the public domain in accordance with your Article 10 EHR right. So folks, we have come to the end of this mainstay topic and I hear you heave a sigh of relief. But we will touch on trespass and PSPOs in coming uploads as topics and as individual scenario analysis. So if you have found this video helpful or useful, please like and subscribe and help make this channel a success. So until the next one, happy snapping!